Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the United College Distinguished Visiting Scholar Lecture 2024 to 2025. My name is Judy, a Year 1 English major, and I'm also the Master of Ceremony for today's lecture. Before the lecture commences, may I have your cooperation in switching off your mobile phones, pagers, or other beeping devices, or have them turned to the silent mode. The United College Distinguished Visiting Scholar Scheme is made possible through the generous support of the college's endowment fund. Under the scheme, United College is able to invite internationally renowned scholars to Hong Kong to give public lectures and meet staff and students from the college and the university. The college is honored to have invited Professor Jacob Soll from the University of Southern California as our distinguished visiting scholar this year. Without further ado, I would like to pass over the floor to the moderator of today's lecture, Professor Stuart McManus. Professor McManus is an associate professor of the Department of History here at CUHK. May I now invite Professor McManus to introduce Professor Soll and the topic of this morning. Professor McManus, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, students, it is my singular honor and privilege to introduce our United College Distinguished Visiting Scholar, Professor Jacob Soll, a university professor at the University of Southern California and a professor of philosophy, history, and accounting. Professor Soll received his PhD from Magdalen College, Cambridge. To date, he has taught variously at USC, Cambridge, Princeton, Rutgers, and the European University Institute in Fiesole, Italy. His scholarly contributions have earned him numerous accolades, including the American Philosophical Society's Jacques Barzin Prize, a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 NEH Fellowships, and a coveted MacArthur Genius Prize. But all this, I'm sure you already know from his Wikipedia page. What you might not know is that, in the spirit of the now venerable UC Distinguished Visiting Scholar Lecture Series, we were so keen to bring Professor Soll to the college and so honored that he accepted our invitation because he is much more than a globally recognized expert in his field. Professor Soll is a man of letters and a man of the world whose work transcends the disciplines that order our day-to-day lives in the university. His scholarship is powerful precisely because it sidesteps the narrow debates that animate the fields of economics, history, and philosophy to face with unyielding resolve the challenges that afflict his country and humanity as a whole. He offers ways to address these challenges that make presidents and prime ministers stop and think. Professor Soll is the author of several influential books. His wildly popular 2014 volume, The Reckoning, offers a comprehensive history of accounting and its role in shaping the rise and fall of nations. His recent Free Market, The History of an Idea, is an international bestseller, and I commend it to all of you interested in the history of one of the most debated concepts of modern times. This should be read alongside his co-authored Public Net Worth, Accounting, Government, and Democracy, published in 2024, that is the talk of the town in capital cities and financial centers across the world. No ordinary historian, an extraordinary scholar of what makes economies and nations tick, an intellectual on whom you can count to cut through the noise and confusion, to give concrete insights and sage advice. Please join me in welcoming Professor Jacob Soll, who will speak to us on the topic of accounting for culture, how the Dutch created the first modern path to wealth, 1500 to 1800. Professor Soll, Jake, the floor is yours.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. It's a joy, as always, to be in Hong Kong. I love this city so much, and I love this college. So, ladies and gentlemen, students, and thank you so much, Professor Wong, to Professor Meng, and thank you, Stuart, my friend, my other friends and faculty here. I'm just delighted to be back. So for me, it's very meaningful to be here and a great, great joy. And it's also interesting to present this presentation here because the history of, I'm really interested, as Stuart said, in what makes things work. And I'm a historian, and a lot of times now we think, I have students writing me, we think that in order to understand the world, we have to do just economics or engineering, and that people don't understand why people even study the humanities. One of the things I want to do, especially because there are so many students in the room here today, is actually give you a sense of what you can do with studying history. And so people are obviously obsessed with how to make nations wealthy. How do you do it? And right now we're in this incredible moment where we have essentially Asia becoming rich again. It was very rich a long, long time ago. Now it's becoming rich again. We're interested in the mechanics of wealth, and it's something that people are fascinated by. So I'm really interested in this, and I'm interested in looking at new ways. These are kind of blunt questions, right? How does a place stay rich? Well, it's not always obvious. So one of the things that I did was I was in the archives, and I was in the archives of the greatest, this is Cosimo de' Medici, the at one time ruler of Florence, in some ways one of the fathers of the Renaissance. I was really digging around in these archives. I was trying to understand the mechanics of the state. How do you get a state that works? So we could also ask today, how do you make a state stop working? That's another big question, for example, in America, right? Trying to stop the state from actually functioning. So I study how you build states. So I was in the archives, literally looking at the mechanics of the state. And I started finding everywhere accounting. That people like Cosimo de' Medici thought accounting was really key. Now he ends up undermining his own state, but I was lucky enough to go into his archives and his papers. And luckily, the handwriting was fantastic in Florence at this time. So I could actually see he actually did his own accounting himself because he was a merchant and a banker. And I started finding that they didn't just use it, they were thinking that accounting was key to governing. It was actually unsaid. And you'd find it in memos, you'd find it in mentions. So as I was doing my work, I kept finding myself in the archives of the most important states in Europe in the time when Europe started becoming richer than China and India, okay? And so I was in these ledger books and I kept finding them and they were very, very important. By the way, historians had worked on this in the 1940s. It was called accounting history. No one cared about it. It had been forgotten. Maybe a few people at the LSE and at Harvard Business School, but it had been forgotten. And I started finding also these works by a guy named Basil Yamey, who died at the age of 99 recently, who was this astounding accounting historian. I found his work and other work, and so I kept going into these archives. Sorry, wait a minute. Uh-oh. Well, let me just jump ahead really quickly. I was in this guy's archive too. This is Philip II of Spain. He's a really famous king. And like so many kings during this period, he's really actually good at building a state, but also destroying his own state eventually. And I'm going to show you that. But one of the things I found was he made accounting reforms. He was constantly bankrupt because he had a giant empire. And he also was intolerant and attacked other countries. And he was bankrupt because of this. So he did all these reforms about accounting. He saw it as absolutely key, okay? So I started asking myself, if Cosimo de' Medici was a great accountant, and he was not a great accountant, but he brought great accountants into his state, where do we find a state where actually accounting works, where it just makes a state rich, where it actually succeeds completely? And I went back to Holland, which is the model we use actually to understand, with Northern Italy, the model we use to understand how Europe gets rich. We sort of study Northern Italy, we study Holland, we study England. And my next talk, I'm going to explain to you why we should also be studying France. France got kind of left out of this narrative, and that's because historians and economists had very narrow ways of understanding how wealth was built and worked. But Holland is really interesting because although it's a country, like Venice, it's also kind of an island. It's basically, surrounded by water. 40% of the country is underwater. And one of the things we find is that many early states, but we could also talk about Hong Kong too, island countries have a way of getting rich. It's a very interesting thing, certain countries. Holland gets rich early by doing something very unusual. It finds a lot of freedom in economic activity. You see those windmills by using technology, by using engineering, starting in the 1100s. Again, we're in China, so 1100s is just not that old. But for Americans, they're like, whoa, 1100s here, yeah, whatever. Not that old, but still it's quite interesting. They start taking water out of the land and they start building these fields. It's called a polder system. And it starts again in the 1100s. So what they do is they start taking agricultural fields out of the water, out of basically the ocean, by using these systems of engineering systems of windmills, levees, walls, dikes, pumps. It's quite extraordinary. They're still using it. And by the way, they are still great water experts. And if you really have a water problem, you want to call in the Dutch. America should have called them in. The Italians should have called them in. We are all going to need the Dutch. Even they're struggling now with global warming because this system of actually removing seawater and pushing the seawater back, they do with fresh water. So if you have no fresh water, this system doesn't work. But look at these fields. This is actually an early medieval system of creating incredibly productive fields out of the water using engineering. This is quite an achievement. It makes free people. So under feudalism, this country's not feudal. It's feudal in various sections, but many farmers are independent, have their own land, and they don't believe their land comes from a lord. They think that God gave it to them because they took it out of the water, okay? So this is really interesting. But there's a financial story of how they take it out of the water too. And that goes into these water boards. So these water boards are, sometimes they're run by a nobleman, sometimes by a city. Groups of citizens have to, from the Middle Ages on, they have to work on the water boards. And what makes them work is not just engineering, but financial management. And so what we see is this remarkable society in which part of your role as a citizen is to serve. Maybe it's on a poorhouse, maybe it's a hospital, maybe it's a religious association, but lots of people have to serve on these boards. And that means they need to know how to do good accounting. Because if these boards financially don't work well, and they're constantly having problems, they're going bankrupt, but if they really don't work well, then everybody dies. Because your whole society is based on this engineering company actually working, all right? So one of the things I found is that we don't totally know where this general interest in accounting comes from in Holland, but this is definitely one of the places. And it's a very existential relationship between financial management, your daily life, and accounting. So one of the funny things about this place, Holland, is it's extremely rich, but it is actually the territorial holding of the Habsburg family, okay? Which brings us back to him, okay? Because he's actually born in Brussels. Actually, sorry, his father's born in Brussels. By now, he's actually king of Spain. He runs the Spanish Empire. He actually sees himself as the protector of the Catholic faith, even more than the Pope. And he starts making war with, he defends Europe from the Turks, but he starts trying to fight Protestants. And this causes a huge problem because those Dutch people, who are the richest people per capita in the world at this point, they're creating more money than anybody per capita. They're his subjects, and half of them have become Protestant. And so this is an interesting thing. We should think about this right now when you have very wealthy citizens who disagree with you politically or religiously. What do you do with them? I'm going to tell you what not to do if you want to stay rich. This. He tries to tax them because he doesn't like them and he wants their money for his wars. So basically he taxes these guys. They're much more organized. They actually have a more modernized naval system. And so they refuse to pay the taxes. So he sends in this guy. And this guy's kind of interesting because today, the richest noble family in Spain is still his family. They have just opened up their palace in Madrid, which is quite spectacular. The Duchess of Alba just died. She was very famous and flamboyant. But it is a little crazy that these guys get rich basically because he does this. He goes into the cities and says, if you won't convert, if you won't pay our taxes, we're just going to burn you down. And so this is Antwerp, which in 1576 is the richest place on the planet, a concentrated place, okay? You have world trade, you have industry, you have proto-finance. This is their city hall. They sack the city. It's 100,000 people, okay? They sack their richest city. This is where Spain gets all of its money. All those galleons with silver and gold coming from Peru and the New World do not give as much as this commercial city, right? So he burns it down. I mean, this is economically one of the most amazing images in history. You have a leader burning down their richest holding because it is disagreeing, because he doesn't want to go through a legal process of taxation and public finance with them. I won't make any comments right now about parallels, okay? You might think of this as Boston or California, right? Oh yeah, it keeps going. This is a very unusual thing. It's part of the European religious wars where professional soldiers kill citizens, private citizens, women and children. And so here we have the Spanish troops killing the women and children. And here we have the Spanish troops killing the women and children. What I want to underline here is these are not only crimes against humanity, they're staggering economic disaster for Spain, okay? There's something else that's going to connect back in with the thesis here, is that those 100,000 people that flee and end up founding this republic in the north, those are the most financially literate people. They flee from Antwerp to a city called Amsterdam, which you've probably heard of, okay? Amsterdam is cool and fun, but I got to tell you, Hong Kong is more cool and fun. Like, as students, people are always like, oh, you want to be a student in Amsterdam? I would say, sure, absolutely, you should try that. But being a student here, this is a very cool city, okay? I mean, it's also really fun, all right? And I can tell you that the food here is 400 million times better than in Amsterdam, or maybe more, maybe 4 billion times better, okay? Sorry. So anyway, what he has, I want you to think about this, is you attack your rich city, but what we know is that money actually comes from a funny source. It doesn't come from agriculture, it comes from brains, you guys. It's a brain game, this whole money thing, all right? A wealthy, healthy, sustainable, productive society is a society that has all these amazing brains working on all these different things, working together, okay? And so they run 50% of his richest town. That's astounding. Amsterdam emerges almost immediately as the richest place in the world, again, per capita, over literally a multi-year period. One of the things we know is that the people who fled were very literate in accounting. And so that might sound nerdy to you, but you have to understand that this good financial management takes expertise, and not that many people had it. So those people were very, very valuable, okay? So they were your best professionals. They were really good at doing things. And by the way, anyone who could go did go. It was really fascinating to learn about, to see this first great brain flight, okay? Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. So what is this accounting thing? Why am I interested in it? It's a way of managing money where basically it's not like your checkbook where you just see how much goes in and how much goes out. You balance your calculation of money by balancing your assets and your liabilities. So if you sell a goat in Florence for 3 florins, you write down that you've received 3 florins, but you've lost the goat. So it's actually based, I think, on algebra. So it has Islamic and actually Asian origins going to Uzbekistan. This idea of a breakage or a missing thing, and you always have to account for the missing thing so that at the end, you can actually truly measure your assets, your liabilities, but also you can measure the concept of profit. So the idea of actually working for profit, managing assets and liabilities with a profit principle is inherent to this kind of accounting. And this is a really important thing. The Florentines were interested, the Northern Italians invent this, the Tuscans invent it, not the Venetians, the Tuscans, and that's because algebra gets to Tuscany in the 1200s. I'm really now sure of this. They have multi-partner firms. It's really interesting stuff. It enters into the language of everyday life because there are Christian and Judeo-Christian concepts of accounting in the Bibles, of there are the great reckonings, the great accountings. And this is actually Tommaso Portinari, who is the head of the Bruges branch of the Medici Bank. And he has this painting painted of himself, which is incredible because he actually breaks the Medici Bank, giving a loan he shouldn't have given. Before that, he has this painting picture where he's being weighed and a great accounting is being done of who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. This painting was stolen by Polish pirates, and it's still in Gdansk, where I actually had the amazing opportunity. It's not that easy to see this painting. It's still hidden away because there was a lawsuit over this painting. It was one of the first international property lawsuits was about this painting stolen by Polish pirates, which is today in Gdansk by Hans Memling, the great Bruges painter, okay? So we're now getting into a world of finance, of history, but also deeply embedded in art and culture, and that's another message I want to talk to you about. I want you to meet basically a Flemish merchant. He's Catholic, by the way. There's a great myth in the West that capitalism was invented by Protestants. Part of it was later, but it's actually Catholics that do it. So there's this need also to kind of own things. It turns out it's various different people who do this. But look at this accountant, okay? Look how proud he is. He's really rich. He's wearing this cloth, which is the cloth actually from Florence that shows that you're wealthy. He's got jewels. He's confident. But this is the technology of accounting, of keeping double entry books. This is a masterwork, okay? This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or is it in the National Gallery? It's in the National Gallery in Washington. I want you to think, you guys live in Hong Kong, right? And you've got some banks here, don't you? A few banks? A little bit of banking goes on in this city. Have you ever been into a bank? Have you ever seen bankers portray themselves actually doing what they actually do? That's actually a really interesting concept. I think bankers should actually do that. But it's a dangerous game. He's actually looking at you with all of this, I don't know if it's pride, and saying, look at, I'm rich, and I do it because I'm an expert. It's a remarkable cultural thing. You don't see paintings like this in Renaissance Italy. There are some accounting paintings, but nothing of this message. What's astounding in Holland is that they focus their culture on this method. There is a massive load of masterworks around accounting. This is Quentin Metsys. This is 1514, okay? This is before the Reformation. This is before the wars of religion. He's already showing in what we would call Flanders. This is your computing system here. So this is also high tech. In Latin, computare means to account. So he's showing that he's accounting, but he's also showing his computer. And he's got a really nice, this is a really nice, like sleek computer, okay, that he has. I'm a financial manager, I'm rich, and we're also pious people, which is an unusual, incredible message. So money next to a prayer book, not necessarily the most Christian thing, and your computer. These are remarkable, remarkable paintings. Oh, but they keep going. So there are just endless loads of masterworks about financial management in early Flemish culture. This is Marinus van Remmersvele. He's the best, okay? This guy does amazing accounting painting. And this is the same painting, but look at this. There's no more Book of Hours, no more religion here. Do you notice something? Who's keeping the books? A woman. Because in Flanders, you have female literacy. Benjamin Franklin said that you always wanted to hire a Dutch man because with a Dutch man came a Dutch woman. And that the Dutch woman was just as educated as the Dutch man, which meant she could actually do financial management. So the value in Philadelphia in the 18th century of hiring a Dutch couple was really, really high. You live in an economy like that in Hong Kong with the financial markets. You've got a couple who can both do these incredible things, then they are extremely valuable, right? Okay? Look at the computing system now. Look at the intensity of it, all right? Antwerp, 1539, oh yeah. That's that city. These are the people that are gonna run to Amsterdam, all right? These are your experts, your accountants. This is another interesting one. Some people think that this is a famous anti-Semitic painting. It could be, but there's also this, which is actually a book strap. If you grew up in Europe like I did when I was young in France, we would carry files when we were students. We had these files made of cloth, and we had cloth book straps. This is actually a book strap. This is actually the way to carry cash in the old days. It's called suggello. Florentine suggello, so they're sealed in wax and they're sealed in cloth so you can carry beautiful gold coins which aren't clipped. It's a way of moving money in a safe way. Here is your computer, but there's something wrong, and this looks like a snake. So there's another message here, and this is extremely sophisticated, okay? That we might get rich by this, but also you have to watch out. So wait a minute, can you imagine, I want you to imagine walking into a bank in Hong Kong and saying, we can make you rich, but we can also rob you and crash the economy too. We can do it all. The Dutch are actually doing this. They're showing off their talent while warning you of the dangers of the very technology that they're showing off. And this is perhaps one of the two greatest accounting paintings of all time. This is also Martinus van Remmersvele. This is the most amazing picture that I've seen from the early modern period of any time of an accounting system, of a double entry accounting system. But there's something really wrong here. Their hats are too big. He's obviously unwell. This is what I call a warning painting. They are showing the highest technology. Can you imagine today if an AI firm actually had a picture of all the possibilities, like we could change the world for the better or we could destroy it, either one. These guys are more or less telling you that. These are pictures warning you about the hubris of their own technology. This is in a masterwork. These are not paintings that you do on a street corner. These are the equivalent of a huge cultural production, like making some giant movie. These are public paintings. These are the main pieces of culture that you see in a financial city. I just want to show you how advanced culturally this moment was, okay, for commerce and what we now call capitalism. This is really one of my favorite paintings because this is of a rich man in Bruges. And Bruges is a great city, one of the most beautiful cities. If you go to Europe, you should visit Bruges because it's actually in Belgium. And unlike the Netherlands, Belgium has great food because it's partially French speaking. And so Bruges has amazing chocolate, fantastic steak tartare, and great fish and oysters. It's really great. You can have the art, you can have the culture, and you can have the food. So it's very important if you're traveling, okay? But this is amazing because this is a rich merchant. And on the other side of this painting are all the public buildings that he's built, like all hospitals, learning buildings. So he's a patron. He's a donor in today's time. So he's a big donor. He's really rich. He's successful. He's got his money. Look at him accounting. But he's also warning you, I know that I've gotten rich. I know that I'm the best. In the back of this picture, I built a big chunk of the most beautiful city in Europe, okay? But he never makes the mistake of thinking he's in control because the person who's paying these accounts is dead. He's standing behind death, which means in the end, the only person who can balance these books is death. Now this, my friends, you know, we need some painters like this in places like New York. We need them everywhere. Hubris, the idea that you're the best. And he says, but even if you're the best, it can all fall apart. It's an incredible message of finance. And so this is the power of the Dutch lion. By the time it becomes Holland, it is the center of finance. It is the center of global trade. It is a tiny republic of 1 million people, which is circling the world, not so much making colonies, but in a very modern way, setting up counters to do trade in other people's colonies. It does set up colonies. It sets up a colony in Formosa. It goes to Indonesia. It goes to a little city called Manhattan, okay, where they set up a counter there too to do finance. But all the time, they're completely aware of what makes their wealth work is accounting. This is another remarkable painting. This is the god of war. This is Mars. This is a double entry system. This is a pictorial explanation of how double entry accounting works. And here are the commercial fleets. This is Antwerp. It was painted the very moment that the city was painted while the city was getting sacked. So by the time this thing actually comes out, it no longer actually, it more or less then represents Amsterdam. So we have this culture. This guy, Simon Stevin, he's a commoner, but he is the humanist of the city of Amsterdam and of the Dutch Republic. He does water physics. He's head of the water management board. He does ancient Greek and Latin. He does all these humanistic things with learning. He actually helps the Navy understand how to make boats that will resist water better. But he also, when he goes to college, this is interesting in Holland, he's a commoner, but he meets the prince because the Dutch Republic is a republic with a prince. He meets this guy, Prince Maurice of Nassau, and they hang out together. And he teaches him accounting, and he writes a book about it. This is an amazing book. And this book basically says, if you want a rich society, you want a rich city, a rich country, you need all of your citizens to learn accounting and become financially literate. You also need them to learn humanism, because there was a tradition by this time that you would go to Latin school and you'd learn your humanism and you'd walk out, and I have a description from Dordrecht of someone walking out of the Latin school and walking down the street to the accounting master. So you would do humane letters and then practical financial mathematics. By the way, that's one of the lessons here. I want you to notice, I'm not showing you a lot of actual financial stuff. I'm showing you humanities. I'm showing you culture. I'm showing you painting. I'm showing you learning. What the Dutch were doing was saying you needed to understand the humanities and financial accounting together. That's the message of those hubris pictures. You need to actually understand your world, philosophy, all these things, because the financial accounting wasn't enough to make you rich either. So in this book, he explains that. It's an amazing book. And he said it would also be helpful if your prince, if the ruler of your city, if your political elite also knew accounting. And it just so happens that, let me just jump to this, that the Dutch will invent this first, there's an earlier company in England, but this is really the first super global company that's really functioning at a high level. It's making a lot of money off of slavery. I'll show you it makes a lot of money off of different things. But when it's invented, it's also the first publicly traded company. So you have the first stock exchange. And one of the reasons I think that this happens is that Dutch people trust each other. They will buy stocks because everybody trusts each other's books. They trust the state's books. They trust, actually all of Europe does, because European interest rates get pegged to Dutch provincial tax returns. It's an extraordinary thing. So in 1602, you have this key moment in world capitalism that emerges, all right? But only 18 years later, the company is starting to lose profits. There are accusations of insider trading. There are accusations of hoarding. And so they actually have the first shareholders revolt, and they ask the prince himself to audit the books. And guess what? In 2006, we found out this book, these are his account books. They were found by some colleagues of mine. This is astounding. He didn't keep them. Does anyone here know how to actually do accounting in this room? So if you learned how to do accounting, so my grandmother is from Germany. She's 104. She doesn't do it anymore. She kept really good account books. My father, who was born in the 1940s, he keeps accounts in his wallet because people learned how to manage their money in times when money was very scarce. It was part of formal education. These are really good books. There are annotations in these by him. He was able to audit his own books. So they say, this company, which by the way, there was a great myth that this was a purely private company. Our colleague Alexander Bick found internal memos showing that it was a state private company, which is an interesting concept. That capitalism is actually invented by partnerships between private people and the state, smart partnerships. And the state comes in, and this guy, this king, actually says, I will audit the books. I can audit the books. And he audits the books, but he says it's going to have to remain secret because all of our trade and military secrets are in the books because this company is running our military. And essentially, he audits the books. He fixes the problem. People trust him. Trust and confidence, okay? You need that for trade. And the company goes on and makes 18% returns for more than 100 years. Can you imagine? That's a good stock. We're not talking 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, more than 100 years, okay? So this is an incredible story of how this company, how this state gets rich. This company is proto-industrial. It's off searching for oil in like a really upsetting way for young people. It's killing whales. It's hurting polar bears. This is a whale oil factory, so this is proto-industrial. This is what the company is now doing. It's also just doing a lot of slavery. Slavery pays. It does. Humans are strange creatures, but they figured out that actually, well, it doesn't pay as much as actually skilled labor. So the Dutch are involved with this. They get rich from it. They also get rich from bringing Asia to Europe, okay? So South America and Asia, they bring all this wealth there. They are managing it. They're managing it really, really well. And this is one thing that makes them rich. So this Spain and Portugal, they will go into Spain and the Spanish and Portuguese empires, and they will extract the wealth from their empires faster. They will manage it faster. They will have better shipping systems, better companies, more efficient ways of handling wealth. They get rich. These merchants, these accountants start getting rich. And actually, I mean, if this is Dutch food, it looks pretty good. By the way, these are barrier oysters from outside of Amsterdam. They're small, they're flat, they're remarkably good. They're one of the few local things that you can just eat that are fantastically good, okay? So here are the proud people of Holland. And one of the things I find so interesting is in the history books, famous history books, this is how the Dutch are represented. But it's not how they represented themselves. This is their most famous portrait. And if you walk into the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and that's quite a museum, my friends. If you want to see, this is one of the museums you need to see in your life. I really recommend you go to Amsterdam, you see the Rijksmuseum, because it is mind-blowing, okay? You see this, but what you don't see is that the city of Amsterdam was filled with hundreds of paintings over a period of 200 years where they represented themselves like this, okay? By the way, look, it's like today they're wearing beards, but I don't think that they were, I don't think it was like a masculinity tough guy thing. I just think it was a Dutch thing at the time. So, but look at this. They have their books open. They're actually showing you, again. So these are the regents of the old people's home in Amsterdam, 1618. Look at us. We are managing your public assets well. And this hand movement basically says, come in and look at us. Why don't you audit us? Because auditing is a deep part of their culture. Oh, there's painting after painting after painting like this, okay? We're keeping the books. Come on in, check our books. We're doing a good job with your money. This is the first really rich commercial society that gets particularly rich, that actually focuses, it sees itself as rich. They don't see themselves as those soldiers. They actually see themselves this way. There are hundreds of these paintings. And look, women doing the same thing. Women financial managers. By the way, we have, so I always recommend that you study the humanities. I actually recommend that you study literature above all. You should read the great books. Great books will change your life. They'll expand your mind. They'll give you tools to understand yourself, your friends, humanity. They'll be a crutch in hard times. They're an antidote to depression. They make your brain grow, okay? Reading great books is the best thing you can do. But it also doesn't hurt to know financial management. If you can do the two, then you can be like the Dutch. So I want you to see this. By the way, there's a world accounting shortage right now. If you become an accountant, you'll get a really high-paying job. But you don't want to just be an accountant, because what they're showing here is you need the art and the culture and the understanding of the world to also be rich. This is really interesting. My colleague, who is Eric Kettelaar, who is chief archivist of Holland, was going into the back rooms of all these institutions and finding that every single one had these paintings. Surely many were destroyed, but he found hundreds of them. And it's utterly fascinating to see these paintings. So this is the way the Dutch saw themselves. They wanted to see themselves. And what Kettelaar and I worked on is, he said, in this period, the Dutch are actually not only making money, but they're doing the accounting. In this period, the Republic becomes corrupt. They're not actually doing the accounting, but they're still showing themselves doing the accounting. So it's super interesting how the tradition continues. So when we look at what makes a place wealthy, this is just one element, okay? But I want you to notice this connection between not only financial management, but culture. How important it was to have a culture that understood what finance meant. Technically, spiritually, within the working world, it's really an astounding thing how sophisticated this actually was. This is basically their prime minister, and he's going to end up he wants to keep the city a republic and not a monarchy, but he's an expert in accounting, but also in physics and mathematics. And he writes this incredible book, basically saying that republics are better than monarchies. And he also says that you should learn accounting. And this book is astounding. I only figured this out recently, way after I'd finished this first book. He actually, in the book, it lists all the assets of Holland while also showing its liabilities as a country. It's a comprehensive balance sheet of the Republic of Holland. However, he wants the books to be public. The prince doesn't want the book to be public. Johan de Witt writes this with this guy who's this incredible scholar. And in the end, the de Witt brothers get killed because they're fighting for open books and they're fighting for the Republic. And so you have this kind of sort of tragedy in Holland where in the end, the good guys don't necessarily win. But this fight is a lot about books, about keeping books open, okay? So that brings us to today, all right? We're in a world where money really matters, where people are getting upset about wealth inequality, where we have global warming, where we have political huge problems going on, where we have the beginning of perhaps a new order where people are going to be fighting over wealth rather than trying to trade and find ways out of it or create better societies. we're in a new age, you guys, and frankly, one to me that seems a little bit scary. But one of the things that people ignore are accountants, and that's what I found during this period. Nobody ignored accountants. And this was a period where you built this kind of remarkable society. So this is the stock photo of an accountant. I find this terrifying. Accountants are good, necessary, you need them. But if this is how you see your financial managers, as maybe the dullest person in the world, they won't be able to think in this global way to solve problems. I wrote this book about all of this, and I wanted to show you that doing history can actually matter, okay? So if you say, oh my God, you're a history major? So my daughter's an art history major at USC, and some of her classmates were like, you're an art history major? Like, what are you gonna do with that? And I'm like, anything you want. Because basically, I wrote a weird book about accounting, okay? And the world had a financial crash. And so basically, they wanted to understand how to solve the problems of the financial crash. So basically, the Greek government, some strange billionaires, and other people, I wrote some articles about it, and the European Commission wanted to know how to deal with Greece. What do you deal with a country? How do you deal with a country that goes bankrupt? That's when you need to bring in accountants. But you also need accountants who can think culturally, because they were fighting with the Germans, people were fighting. And so I literally got brought in, I was younger. This is the communist, the former communist prime minister of Greece. The joke is, the irony is that the communist prime minister did the accounting reforms. He actually did them. One of his friends from childhood was a communist economist from Crete, one of my best friends, and he came to USC where we did a summit about accounting and the Greek debt crisis. They listened, they did the reforms, and Greece got out of this. All these Southern European countries start doing these reforms. This is me working. There's my friend, Fraiskos, who actually was the guy that did it. This is us in the Greek parliament actually making the reforms go through, okay? Greece, I mean, arguably in some ways the most beautiful place in the world. I mean, if you want to, also, if you're going to do something in your life, sail the Greek islands drinking wine, okay? You can just go on a ferry boat. Don't go to the tourist islands. Go to the islands where there's nothing. Have the food, drink the wine, watch the sunset, and read the books, you guys, okay? It's an amazing thing to do. But it turned out Greece was pivotal to the survival of Europe, which is still the biggest trading bloc in the world, all right? And we managed to stabilize Greece with this. By the way, this is the now conservative prime minister. He kept the communist reforms because he's a smart guy too, and they knew to actually keep these reforms, which are about good public service, good financial management, all right? So having a state bureaucracy with good people who are honest and care is really, really important. You don't want to fire those people because they're key to making your country work, all right? So we managed to keep those reforms. This led me closer to other European leaders. Actually, when my friend Pedro Sanchez, who is running a country right now with the highest growth rate in Europe, more than 3.7%, okay? He took as his finance minister, not an economist, but a budget expert. And he didn't do all the accounting reforms. I mean, we're very close friends, but he's a very smart guy. And he knew that good financial management was going to be key to not only the wealth of Spain, but the reforms that he wanted to do, which was raise the minimum wage, put money into education, health, and transport, which he did. And right now, you don't see any uprisings in Spain. You see high financial growth, okay? This has led me to work with other world leaders. We're now trying to figure out nationalism and we're trying to keep people from fighting with each other, essentially. And so we're doing a project with Gordon Brown. Gordon wasn't so interested in the accounting per se, but in the idea of going into things with a historical view of problem solving, okay? So Gordon is at USC and we're doing big projects with him on that right now, a huge project at the Schaefer Institute of Public Policy. I've been now working, so my books, it's really interesting. We're huge bestsellers in Asia. So in Asia, this was really interesting to me. So did okay in America, did okay in Europe, but huge bestsellers in East Asia. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. So who's interested in my message? East Asia. What's the richest place in the world right now? East Asia. I was like, it's just extremely interesting. It's not something I can study or put my finger on, but the East Asian public is interested in these not only concepts of accounting, but also new ways of looking, or not new ways, but their own ways of looking at economics. And that's going to be my next talk, is that Asia's looking at things in ways that Westerners somehow can't manage to do, and it might be one of the reasons that the West isn't becoming as rich as Asia. Although America was on its way, it will not be now. I guarantee what has happened in America will stunt America's growth in a way that will probably be irreparable. That's just my prediction. It is my profound belief. But I've been working with people across Asia, and what's really interesting is I went to the guys with this new work that I've done, went to the guys that kind of invented the Korean economic miracle, and they too are thinking in new ways. It was really, really interesting. So as a historian, I get to go and work with these people making policy, doing finance, and I tell them the stories that I'm telling you, historical stories, and they're really interested in history because they truly believe that it's useful for solving these huge problems and creating better, wealthier, more sustainable places, okay? And that means thinking through history. It means thinking in different ways. It means connecting with the past. It means understanding culture and languages and literature. So you don't just get rich by going and doing mergers and acquisitions. You can do it. But if you want it to last, I think the Dutch model is you need to be sophisticated. And that's what you have here. You have a big university. It's filled with teachers of history, of political science, of literature, of philosophy, of all these different things, of linguistics, of all these things. You need to put all of this together if it's going to actually be successful, given the way the world's problems are. And by the way, one thing history has shown us, you want to invest also back into this kind of sophisticated education. This is the source of wealth, you guys, is sophisticated education and research, all right? And that is really one of the lessons that I give in all of these lectures. People say, you know, what is it? How can we stay rich? I say, invest in your educational system, all of it, and then pump money into your research for higher ed. You will get richer. You are in one of the best universities in the world and one of the richest places in the world. And this all works. One of the reasons this works is because of this institution that you're in now, which is one of the top research universities in the world, okay? That's one of the sources of wealth. You've got those towering banks, but without this, the towering banking actually doesn't work. That's that old Dutch message. And so it brings me back to that final message. You don't want that sort of corporate image. You want the sophisticated, that deep, old cultural image of wealth mixed with deep understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Soll, for your educational and insightful talk. Please be seated on stage. I am sure that there will be some questions from the floor, so may I now invite Professor McManus, moderator of today's lecture, to come up on stage and host a Q&A session for us. Professor McManus, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Soll, for that really tremendous and wide-ranging presentation that took us from the Renaissance to today, and from early global warming and climate change to the Greek debt crisis. So I'm sure we have many questions from our students. Don't be afraid. And if you don't ask the questions, he'll ask the questions of you. So.
If you guys don't ask questions, I will come into the crowd, or I might start uncontrollably crying and embarrass everyone. So, questions, please. Okay.
So I'll do a warm-up. Thank you for a tremendous talk, Jacob. So my question is, how do you think we should incorporate financial literacy and financial management into our educational programs, even extending from K to 12, not only in university.
I mean, so I worked for a long time with a group of people trying to make basic accounting compulsory like it used to be. It used to be for a while, it was compulsory education in places like Europe and America. You had to learn it. You had to be a householder. This really goes back to the 18th century in Europe, where accounting became part of basic education, but in particular in Great Britain, where it really, really becomes sort of central to it. We tried to do it, and I had big billionaire backing, I had governments, we couldn't do it. So there just wasn't interest for it. By the way, I believe that you should come into your university, you should read great books, you should do history, and you should have one serious course in financial accounting. For all of you, because all of you will have bank accounts, all of you will own pairs of shoes, some of you will own property. It's Hong Kong, not an easy thing, not an easy thing. And if you do own that property, my God, accounting will help you, okay? It's not so easy. And by the way, what we then decided to do, we figured out that we would then try and target government, people in government, so that they would become more aware of accounting. We had some success with that. But so we couldn't do this general thing. So we started looking at the people who would matter in certain decision making. So it is really a big issue. Why we've lost this, one of the reasons we've lost it is because of that slide of the boring. No one wants to be an accountant because it's not sexy. They want to be bankers, they want to be engineers, they want to be doctors. They don't want to be accountants, okay? So it's a huge problem. So one of the ideas was to try and explain just how important this is, or to even change the curriculum. And that's just a huge, that's something that the accounting industry will have to do, because the accounting industry is in bad shape. It is not attracting the best minds. Questions? You guys in the back, questions over there. You guys who hid over there, I'm going to come to you. I know you have a question. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get American on you guys. Normally I wouldn't do this so questions, you guys, questions. From the girl who's asleep, I won't ask her. Okay, I won't ask her. Let's make sure she's alive, okay? You okay? You okay? Good. I'm just doing it. It's a medical check. She's okay. She's okay. Questions, you guys. I'm going to embarrass you unless. No questions.
Oh, there's a hand up at the back on the left.
All right.
Thank you so much, Professor Soll. I would like to check with you about a question about the public governance.
Yeah.
Because nowadays there are many governments, the UK, the Hong Kong, the US, some state governments, they are running in budget deficit.
Yeah.
I want to know that from your lecture, what lesson can we draw and give us some inspiration to how to improve or correct this problem? Thank you.
This is a great question. So you have all these countries, cities, entities that have deficits. And why does that matter? Because they have debt. And at a certain point, they're going to have too much debt, which means there will be cuts. There'll be cuts into healthcare. There'll be cuts into your public transport. There'll be cuts to your university and to your schools. You don't want that. There'll be cuts to the managing of global warming and just of the quality of your water. We're seeing that in England. England basically almost doesn't even have like drinking water now. England, I mean, it's completely crazy. Or Britain, whatever it's called. And so one of the things I say, so then in America, you've got Doge. You've got this crazy non-elected person coming in and just firing people. No. History shows that's not how to do it. What you need to do is actually make sure you're using the best financial tools. You need to have an open audit. You need accrual accounting, okay? At that point, you can decide what to do. Conservatives might say, let's cut all the spending. Non-conservatives or other people might say, let's actually do a whole bunch more spending. But before you can make that decision, you actually have to manage it well. And for your public to go along with it, the best thing you can do is have a trustworthy audit to show them that you're doing this. The only country that truly does this is New Zealand. Every decision that the Prime Minister of New Zealand makes is made with a public ledger. So every decision, like I want to build some bridges, it literally is accrualed out so that you can make your decision for or against, and the public can decide according to these basic measures of accounting. So I'm not telling you to come in here and do a policy to cut or spend or whatever. I'm telling you that before you do that, you need to actually start valuing your assets and your liabilities and managing your money well. So that's another thing. You have to actually, countries and cities own all this stuff. It has to be managed. We don't actually manage it right now. So this is an age where there are going to be shortages. So one of the things I've worked with this group of, one was, I think he was head of Morgan Stanley here in Hong Kong for 10 years, a brilliant, brilliant guy. Basically, our idea was you actually have all these assets that the state owns that are being terribly managed. Since we don't have enough, it's a time of scarcity and debt, we need to come in and manage these assets better. So this is something that seems easy. There's no reason we don't do it. There's some reasons, but we actually have really great tools right now to deal with these problems. And we're trying to get leaders to do it. They only do it when their backs are against the wall. The Greeks did it, and they did really well from that. So a place like Hong Kong with so much financial expertise could do amazing work in public financial management. You guys have the talent. Any more questions from up here? Thank you so much. Well done. Well done. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Soll, for the very interesting lecture that you just gave to us. My question is about, you just, before this question, you briefly mentioned about the industry of accounting and all. And from the report that is talking like the industry of accounting is declining and there is a crisis within the accounting world.
Yeah.
And also the revolution of AI is also like
Right.
threatening all of it. So what do you suggest and what can we do, or what can other like people in your power can do to prevent this, or any kind of other suggestions?
Well, I mean, I see AI. AI can be good or bad, like anything. Like, I actually had someone say accounting's evil because it was used for slavery. I'm like, that is philosophically absurd. My shoe could be bad if I hit somebody with it, but it's good if I wear it. I mean, that's just, so AI, imagine bad AI getting into accounting, that would be scary, but good AI could be remarkably helpful. Between blockchain and AI, we have the capacity for the system to kind of actually audit itself. And this is something that could be extremely helpful. So lower jobs in accounting are going to become scarcer, but if you're very educated and you can think creatively and do analytical work, then those accounting jobs will become not only more interesting, but much more high paying and can outrun AI till it eats all of us up. Then we'll have to figure out what we do with ourselves. That could come next year, it could come in 10 years, it might not come. We can't think like that. What we have to do is try and actually educate ourselves. So you don't want to just become an accountant, you want to become a super accountant. And I think that's the same for everything. You want to be good at something, you need to think about it in a really creative way. You live in a competitive world, you want to go into a profession, you want to thrive in that profession, you can't just walk into it like the next person. You need all those tools of culture. Reading books, looking at alternative views, okay? Reading in different fields, having life experience. Work in a butcher shop. Learn how to fish. I'm telling you, these things are super useful, okay? And then you come in and you can actually take your profession or your field much higher. So that's what I think. So there's a great opportunity for those who want to do accounting. By the way, I have a student from USC who was an accounting major, but she hated it. So she came with me and she did an honors degree in history. She did a master's degree at Cambridge, and Bill and Melinda Gates called up and immediately, they were like, this girl can do, she speaks Mandarin, she speaks English, she speaks French, and she can do forensic accounting, and she actually was doing the history of accounting education in the 18th century in Britain. They were like, yes, boom, she's in. Now she's like running this completely cutting edge solar company in LA, which is really hard. So yeah, that's what you can do with a history major, okay? Questions? Questions? Don't be scared, you guys, just a little scared. Questions? You always, well, if you're sitting here and I'll tell you, you need it if you're just literally have a few pennies. This is why my father and my grandmother's from a wealthy family, and my grandmother's from a wealthy family, my father was not. They both learned accounting because during the Great Depression and the war, you had so little that you had to manage it so well. The less you have, the better argument you have for it. If you just have a few beans, you really need to do accounting well. You really need to understand literally how to manage the smallest amount of stuff that you have efficiently. You'll always have something unless you're literally dying of starvation and don't have the force. By the way, there are studies of people whose finances get so bad that they stop accounting because they feel hopeless and it gets worse. So that is a problem, people feeling hopeless and saying there's nothing that this can help me with. We find that that's not true. There was a study, that was one of the inspirations of this book. I read that study and I was like, that's so interesting. The people who need it the most give up because they feel so hopeless.
So we'll maybe take one more question.
And one more question. This is going to be from a non-man. Okay, I would like a question from a female, please, because don't dishonor me. We need that. Yes, right on. Let's do it.
Wait a moment for the mic. Here we go. Wait a moment. Thanks.
Actually, I study global politics as well. And actually, in your talk, you mentioned that invest into the education system is the road to prosperity. But like in my study, I know that some of the global South countries, they are forced into like structural adjustment programs.
Oh, yeah.
So how can they invest the money into the education system to the road of prosperity?
Okay, well, they can't necessarily invest it. Also, if people cut foreign aid, they're ruined, right? But I have an interesting story. And it's not the global South, but it's a poor country in Europe, and I can't tell you. But one of the ministries started doing this high level, what's called ipsis accounting. So they're using this very high level of accounting. And a very big country in Europe came and said, by the way, you owe us $150 million. Because this is what happens with global South countries. You say, hey, you owe us all this debt. We've made a deal with you. A lot of those deals with the global South are not good deals at all, right? Coming from all big countries going into the global South, a lot of the times people just don't treat the global South well. They're just robbing them. What happened in this poor European country is they said, actually, we're keeping these remarkably good books, and not only do we not owe you the money, but you owe us money. We're very happy to come up to the European Commission to bring the national accounting boards and the banks together and to show you. And they said, no, that's okay. So you can protect yourself. So one of the things that we've done in the International Federation of Accountants is literally try and teach governments in the global South accounting so they can not just manage their assets, they can protect themselves. So that's one of the most important things you can do. And people are doing that right now. IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants and whatever, IFAC is spending a lot of money and time going to the global South and helping chartered accountants function. It sounds like the nerdiest thing in the world. It's super important. It's precisely because of what you asked. Great question. Thank you. Well done. See?
Okay, so I think at this point we'll thank our wonderful speaker once again. And thank you to you all for coming. And we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday when Professor Soll will be giving the second in his series of lectures.
So thank you, Professor Soll and Professor McManus again. May Professor McManus please be seated, and Professor Soll please remain on the stage. To express the college's appreciation, we have prepared souvenirs for Professor Soll. May I now invite Professor Stephen Wong, our college head, and Professor Helen Meng, chairperson of the DVS committee, to present the souvenirs. Professor Wong and Professor Meng, please.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and please remain on stage. May I now invite the college management, members of the Distinguished Visiting Scholar Committee, and college guests to come up on stage and take a group photo together.
No, it's great. It's fun. Watch the tape. Oh, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Please be seated.
Thank you. Thank you. Work, okay? Thank you. Cheers. Thank you so much.
May I now invite everyone to take a group photo together.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, good. Oh, excellent. All right, put this down for this one.
Thank you again for attending this lecture, and wish you all a pleasant afternoon. Please also note that there will be another Distinguished Visiting Scholar lecture on A Royal Road to Wealth, How Monsieur Colbert Built the First Large-Scale Modern Market by Professor Soll next Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. at Sir Runrun Shaw Hall of CUHK. Also, please scan the QR code to give us some feedback if you have registered for the college assembly. Hope to see you in the next lecture. Thank you.